So today we're talking about tips for dealing with summer heat and mental health. So we've so far been pretty lucky. In Sacramento, we haven't had as much heat as we usually have by this time of year, but it's probably coming. Can you not hear me? You can't hear me. Okay, so we'll try to turn up the volume. So we're talking today about tips for dealing with summer heat and mental health. Can everybody hear me? Okay, in the back too? Great. So we've been pretty lucky, is what I was saying, here in Sacramento this year so far, but not all of the world has been quite as lucky as we have. And it's good to think about how the impact of heat could have on us and our friends and our loved ones before it hits. And it's frequently something that people don't really think about in terms of mental health. So one of the things we know is that physical impact of summer heat on older adults, such as heat stroke and heat exhaustion, are well known. We usually, think about staying cool for our physical health in the summer and when we are traveling to destinations that are heat impacted. But it's very important that we also add to our knowledge that summer heat can also have a psychological impact on individuals, which can lead to difficulty functioning, significantly worsen mental health and mental health outcomes across a large range of populations. And then as global temperatures continue to rise, understanding the impact of heat exposure is becoming even more of an important public health priority. If the heat impacts our cognition or our mental health, it might even affect our physical health more because we're not going to have the faculties together to be able to take action. So it's really good to think about it in advance. Jane Gilbert, the world's first chief heat officer or health officer, a position established in 2021 in Miami-Dade County. She said extreme heat can make people more depressed or irritable. It can bring out psychotic outbreaks, and people on certain psychiatric medications are more sensitive to heat. And so they are putting people in more positions to be able to deal with different types of environmental things that are impacting communities and society. So she was the first one, and she's done a lot of different studies and things. But I think that those jobs and positions are probably going to increase as we see more need for it. The higher temperatures are outdoors, people might become more isolated as seniors. They might become more lonely as older adults, and it can lead to increased symptoms of depression because you aren't as able to be as active and go out places as you normally would if you feel like you have to stay indoors with the air conditioning. So that's one of the ways that it can impact people's mental health. Extreme heat can also increase people's irritability, their impulsivity, and their ability to concentrate. And those are really important factors for all of us to be able to do what we need to do from day to day. Some medications also to treat behavioral health issues are impacted by hot weather and the amount of fluid that we drink. They're metabolized different. They are different dosages. Some of them need to be adjusted. Lithium is one of the medications that needs to be adjusted. Or there. Okay. Is that better? Thank you. Thank you for pointing it out. It was a thing notifying us that it's recording, so it'll be available for people later when they want to watch it. So it's good that we got it out of the way. So some some medications, as we just discussed, lithium is one of them because it is somehow related to salt. And so then when your body processes things differently and metabolizes things differently based on the heat and the fluid, then the dosing is different. And so usually when the medication does have some of those things, there'll be warnings on the side and the doctors will discuss it. But if you think that you might be on some kind of medication, medication's really beyond my scope, but it is something that should be in all of your doctor's scopes, and they're usually very knowledgeable about that. Don't be afraid to ask. Sometimes in appointments, people get busy and forget about those kinds of things, but it's good to be aware, especially as we're heading into more of the summer months.
And they can also talk to their pharmacist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you can also ask your pharmacist. That's totally true, or even call the pharmacy if you have and see if there's anything that they make recommendations for. A 2022 study in Nature on climate change analyzed data from 3.5 million psychiatric emergency visits. Then this is in California over 9 years, and found extreme heat significantly increases psychiatric emergency department visits, particularly for schizophrenia, mood disorders, and anxiety. So I know that when I worked in the emergency room, I saw a lot more people come in for a variety of different things, and some of that was attributed to all the activities that people do in the summer, the boating and all the different things like that. But there is an increase in the people that come in for mental health issues as well, and that can be for a whole different variety of things. So we're going to talk a little more about that. So what does the research show? Heat may exacerbate mental health symptoms across many diagnoses. Another U.S. study, this is nationwide, of mental health related emergency department visits found an 8% increase in mental health visits on the hottest days of summer compared with the coolest days. The increase ranged from 5 to 11% depending on the different types of disorders people had. So some are more likely to cause challenges for people and lead to emergency room visits depending on what they are. So what populations share the most risk? So older adults, your thermoregulatory capacity declines with age. So our ability to make adjustments and our body's ability to make adjustments to both heat and cold can get more challenging over time. So I'm sure that some of you have kind of noticed, even with like the thermostats become more important as we get older, and we find ourselves playing with them more often, which is normal and to be expected. But it does also apply to the outside where we don't have control over the thermostats. Also, individuals with specific mental health conditions exacerbated by heat. Those include substance use disorders, anxiety, stress-related disorders, mood disorders, and as we discussed with the research, schizophrenia and related disorders. Also, even self-harm and childhood behavioral disorders. So think about just even like the alcohol consumption, at the park parties or different things like that. Those kinds of things increase, then mental health decreases, and people's interactions socially sometimes are affected. If somebody's drinking a lot of alcohol, different conflicts can arise, and all of that is mental health. So it's kind of important to keep that in mind, especially as we head into the 4th of July here coming up. The other thing that people don't think about, but cities themselves trap heat significantly more than their surrounding areas because of all the cement and the buildings, which decrease the airflow and the ability of the breeze to blow through. Those things trap the heat disproportionately in lower income areas also. And so those face substantially higher heat exposures. I feel like Sac State and the surrounding areas have done a really good job of planting trees and maintaining their canopies. When we had a covered patio put on the back of our house, the contractor told us that can bring the temperature down 10 degrees from whatever it is. So kind of thinking that shade actually really does make a difference. It sometimes doesn't feel like it, but if you're someplace and you really feel like it's too hot, finding a way to get into a shaded area is going to be really important. And if on hot days, you can spend more time where there's green areas, tree canopies, things like that, less cement. Those are other ways to help improve like your surroundings and your ability to tolerate heat, because it won't be as extreme as it would be if you were like in a cement area with tall buildings and reduced ventilation. The most affected regions for these populations that are most at risk are the Northeast, Midwest, and the Northwest. Researchers found, perhaps indicating these dangers of at-home heat stress. These areas are less likely than the South to have housing with air conditioning built in. So that's the other thing, is that people think, well, I'll go to an area that tends to be cooler and I won't have to worry about it. But the areas that tend to be cooler, they're less likely to have air conditioning built into them. And so that is something to just think about. I remember being in San Francisco a couple times during heat waves, and everyone has the windows open, but it's not enough sometimes, because there's not air conditioning in all of the older buildings. And so if you are thinking in terms of like, well, I'll go to this area. I mean, even Oregon has had some 100-degree weathers and days the last few years, and a lot of those houses don't have air conditioning built in. So in some cases, if your choices are an area that has air conditioning inside and it's reliable, or you can travel someplace where it's cooler, but there might not be air conditioning, and you know that you have a heat sensitivity, it's important to kind of take that into consideration. That's why with the South, I mean, the South does get hot and humid, so most of those places are more likely to have it just built in. So how heat can affect the brain and your behavioral health. So how does that affect your neurology? Your brain is temperature sensitive. Elevated core body temperature impairs the prefrontal cortex, which is the region of your brain that regulates emotions. And so if it is overly heated, then it's going to impact your ability to process things. So I think most of us have seen somebody who got some sort of an overheat exertion of some kind, and we usually think of it as being physical. But if you think back to that situation, did that person really seem like really with it and able to like help themselves out of the situation? Not as much as we really think. So usually they need somebody else to kind of help them once it gets to the point where you're heat exerted. The other part is sleep disruption. Rising nighttime temperatures impairs sleep quality, and it can contribute to mental health consequences of sleep disruption. So especially during heat waves, when day after day and night after night, people have inadequate cooling at night and lack sleep over time, that sleep deprivation can really impact people's both health and mental health. And kind of one of the things we say in mental health is when sleep goes down, rationality and ability to process goes down. Like it's and erratic behavior goes up, because inversely, because your brain just can't process when it hasn't had any time to rest in between in the same way it can if it gets a break. And sleeping is one of the only restorative ways that parts of your brain can rest. So it is really important to notice that if you lose sleep one night because your air conditioner is not working appropriately, it's a real thing to be concerned about. You don't want that to happen night after night. And if you're not able to get it repaired, maybe going and staying in a hotel or someplace else temporarily with a relative until like that can get resolved is a very legitimate problem-solving strategy. Physiological stress, heat activates the sympathetic nervous system, causing cortisol in your brain, which is a hormone in your brain, to rise. And when it's combined with physical stress, it will tends to increase irritability. And we can all probably think of a situation where it's really hot. Even if you're kids, it's really hot and you're all stuck in the back seat of the car, people get irritated with each other. It's easier to get annoyed. But we don't think about that as really being a mental health thing, but it can be, especially for longer periods of time. And then how heat can affect the brain and behavioral health includes dehydration. When you're dehydrated, it can increase your irritability, anxiety, and fatigue, cognitive impairment, even before you feel thirsty. So that's the thing to kind of think about, is that sometimes, especially if you're already kind of sleep deprived and things like that, you're not going to notice when you're as thirsty. All those things kind of go together in a domino type effect. Medication effects, we talked a little bit about this, but severe psychiatric medications or several psychiatric medications significantly impair heat regulation, especially with some severe things like psychosis. Some of the antipsychotics like lithium, we talked about that, but then other things, medications that like anticholinergic medications, which are some of the antidepressants, can reduce sweating, impair thirst perception, and affect the body's temperature regulation. And so those things are just really important. They don't use as many of those medications as much anymore, but a large percentage of population have used them for a long time. And so if you've been on some medication for a long time and you've gone through some summers and you've been okay, you probably have things worked out, but it's still worth asking if you think maybe something needs to be adjusted, or if there's something that you think you might be interested in having more information about. If you're planning to travel someplace like Death Valley or something, it's good to, don't be afraid to ask. And it's a very legitimate question. And then the economic impact. Heat stress affects mental health, not only directly, but due to increased cost of electricity, which increases the stress on individuals and families in the community. And so as a result of that, I did include some resources in the newsletter. If there are low income and different types of medical discounts that people can get if you need to have more air conditioned run or more electricity. SMUD and PG&E have different programs like that. You can log into their site and make requests for information on that if you need to, because that's a real thing for people to need more electricity to run their air conditioners more when they're older adults and they have health issues and mental health issues that could be affected.
Is that only for their financial situation and not people senior? Because
There's also for medical, pardon me?
I make enough money that I've been eligible, but being a senior, sometimes I would like to take advantage of it. Is it just for people with economic?
So some of it is for the medical part of it too. So you can look up whatever their requirements are, because some of it is also for the medical piece of it. So when you have medical problems that relate to increased need for electricity, so oxygen obviously is one of them, and different durable medical equipment that requires being plugged in, but then air conditioning is a very real thing. The need for air conditioning or the need for heating, those types of things. And over time, you know, maybe people can pay their bills okay, but over time, running your air conditioner all summer long can make a difference if it's a lot of hot days financially. Oops, sorry. A little bit too fast. So what should we look for? According to the Anxiety and Depression Association of America, there's several signs that hot weather is affecting your mental health. So one is behavioral changes, especially impulsivity. So if you feel like impulsive, if you feel like you're not taking as long as you normally would to think through things or get things done, and you're kind of feeling what you call short, I think is one of the things people say, I feel short with things, that is actually kind of a red flag to look at, that maybe it's because you're too hot. Cognitive issues like trouble concentrating on your memory. People who have dementia and aren't able to kind of problem solve through that are more likely to be stuck in a hot house and not get things adjusted. So that's a good thing to kind of watch out in our community and our neighbors. because if you have memory problems and executive function, problem solving problems, you're going to be more likely to just try to sit it out and not be able to think through the ways to keep yourself cool in advance. And then once you get too hot and overheated, your ability to process through what you need to do to get yourself to a better place is also going to decrease. And then difficulty sleeping that we talked about, feeling stressed and overwhelmed is something that's important to pay attention to if you feel stressed and overwhelmed. In addition to that being possibly exacerbated by heat, it also reduces your capacity to problem solve in those types of situations. So for example, if your electricity goes out because of some kind of rolling blackout and you're already feeling stressed and overwhelmed, problem solving where you might go with that is going to be more challenging as well. And so it is kind of good to have a plan if that would happen, that, you know, you have batteries in places that you need to, and then a plan of where you might go if there was electric outage. It's just something that's a good emergency plan that people have, and you can have a conversation with somebody about that in advance. Or sometimes hotels outside the area will have air conditioning in them, and people go when their region is out of electricity. Mood changes, including feeling more depressed, irritable, and anxious, and then physical symptoms like headaches, dizziness, and nausea. And when we get headaches or we're dizzy or we're nauseated, you tend to be more irritable, right? And more short. And so what I try to tell people is that, you know, our mental health lives in the same body that our physical health does. We're all under one body and one umbrella. So when one thing feels worse, so does the other. We're all connected. And so, and then we're connected to each other too. So we notice when it's happening in a family, if it's just one family member that's having a hard time, everybody notices that too. So I think there can also even be increased conflicts and stuff like that in families when there's too much heat and not enough relief. So almost all psychotropic medications, except for benzodiazepines, which are more like the Valiums and stuff, can impair the body's ability to handle heat, raising the risk of heat exhaustion and heat stroke. And then the really important part of that is that 1/6 of Americans are on these medications. So it's very widely used. It's very common. And so it's just good to be aware that it can affect like your ability to tolerate heat. And that's according to Joseph Tallarico, a clinical psychologist at Cognitive Behavioral Consultants in New York. And then he's on the Joint Advocacy and Outreach Committee of Climate Psychiatry. And then there's also a Climate Psychology Alliance of North America. And so those agencies didn't get created because there's not a need for it. There is an increased need. And hopefully in the future, there'll be more research, because it really does need to be more called out that the summer can cause blues too. People think about the winter blues, which is a real thing, but there is a certain amount of summer blues too that people get from feeling too trapped indoors, and limited with being able to go out and do their activities they really enjoy. Individuals who are most at risk for heat mental illnesses are those with chronic illness, since limited mobility and worsened physical symptoms during heat waves can impact your mood. If your mobility is limited, then you're not going to be able to just go outside and quickly get back inside. So people tend to just stay more sedentary inside, but then that can really lead to feeling isolated. And then people with dementia, which is a risk for hospitalization and death during heat waves. There's been a lot of news about that in some of the other parts of the world, and kind of reflects back on what I talked about earlier. Financial challenges that don't allow for people to feel like they can use their air conditioning or that they can go to the health system if they need it. And then pre-existing mental health conditions, especially people taking antidepressants and antipsychotics, which may affect how your body regulates temperature. And then substance use problems, which make it harder to adapt to temperature change and may lead to dehydration. That's the other thing to kind of know about alcohol, is that alcohol is not only a depressant, physiologically, but it also can lead to more dehydration. So when people are outside in the heat drinking alcohol and not drinking enough other fluids to compensate for that, you can get heat stroke faster because of the dehydration too.
Nothing straight out alcohol or alcohol.
Alcoholic beverages.
So like the sangria with, even though it's nice and refreshing, for the alcohol,
Alcohol can dehydrate people, yeah. So
even in some way.
like any kind. And obviously, the more alcohol you drink, the more dehydrated you can be. So it's good to offset that with water and some other things. Obviously, the more the alcohol is diluted in whatever drink you're drinking, then you have other fluids in there. But it's just something to keep in mind because most people just don't think about that, you know? Like knowledge is power. You can make choices that can help yourself in advance. That's where we're at here. So what can we do about it? Access to cooling, air conditioning access is the most effective protective factor against heat-related harm, including mental health harm. Programs that expand cooling access to low-income and vulnerable populations are both physically and mentally protective. And there are cooling centers around the area. Most of the city halls have either cooling centers in them or they'll be able to direct you to cooling centers or a place, especially if there's a power outages. It's good to know. Green infrastructure that we talked about earlier, urban greening, trees, parks, green roofs, reduces urban heat island effects and has independent mental health benefits through access to nature. It doesn't trap the heat as much so as we talked about earlier, and then it can offer some shade to bring down the temperatures. And then also the heat warning and response system, public health systems that identify vulnerable individuals and provide active outreach during heat events save lives and may reduce psychiatric crises. So I encourage people to stay on top of the weather and the weather-related newses and warnings in your area, because sometimes it can sneak up quickly, or maybe the weather man earlier in the week was not as accurate. And as the week goes on, it starts to heat up in a way that maybe is not healthy. And so it's good for us to just stay on top of, yes, it's summer and it's warm, but exactly how warm, and do we pay enough attention to like the warnings in our area so that we can be proactive in advance and do something about it before it gets us to where we're incapacitated and not as good at problem solving as we could be. So medication management, if you have questions about medications, you can talk to your doctor. People on psychiatric medications should discuss heat safety with their prescribers. Some medications warrant dose adjustments or any kind of additional monitoring. Personal protective practices: stay hydrated, limit peak sun, outdoor exposure, and access to cool spaces during heat waves are protective. There's the spray bottles with the little fans, which are kind of like a little mini version of what it probably would be a swamp cooler with the water, and there's misters. Some people take ice packs with them. There's even cooling vests where you can get a vest and it has ice packs that you can put in them. And there's things you can put around your neck that you can put in the freezer. And for that matter, you can take your own towel and, put water on it or something like that and put that in the freezer. And that can actually really bring your temperature down if it feels out of control. So just those are some things to think about, because we want you all to keep doing what you do and being okay. So drink water. Dehydration can worsen stress, anxiety, and irritability, and also change the medications. Make healthy choices. Physical health supports your mental health. So by you guys all working on your physical health, it improves your mental health, just because we all live in the same body and we're all connected. Eating balanced meals, exercising, and getting enough sleep. Managing stress using meditation, yoga, and other techniques to reduce stress. Socialize, being around other people can boost your mental health. So if for some reason somebody or if you yourself feel like you're been inside too much with all the air conditioning and you feel like you need to spend more time with other people, try to find another air conditioned environment that you can socialize, call somebody, make sure that you stay connected to other people. Just because the heat might have you trapped indoors doesn't mean you have to stay in one place. You can go to the mall, you can go bowling, you can come here. This is a really big space, even though it's air conditioned, so you're less likely to get kind of cabin fever, those types of things.
Library.
Yeah, libraries are good things, museums, and then there's, even places where art, like the Crocker, things like that, places where you can actually get out or you can see things and do things, but you're not going to be quite as exposed to the heat. And then you can aim towards, we're really lucky here because it cools down at night and then it's cooler in the morning. So like if you feel like you need to get sun, then you can go out in the morning when it's cooler, and then try to avoid being outside during the hottest times of day. Spend time during the hottest parts, either in the shade, wear clothing that's cooling, use fans and air conditioning, and also taking cold showers or just even cooler showers. And then when you get out, you're going to feel cooler. Sometimes people do that before they go to bed if they're living in like hot environments. It makes a difference.
Yeah, one of the things that I did was you can check like the 10-day forecast
Yeah,
and plan some of your outdoor stuff depending on which days.
which is good. Yeah. And then continue to take your medication as directed. If you're being treated for mental health, just contact your doctor or your pharmacist if you have any questions. So does anybody else have any ideas on how you stay cool and you manage during that's checking the 10-day forecast is one of them. Is there any additional ways that people stay cool or manage during the summer?
When we were kids, we used to put a watermelon in the refrigerator and then we had a cold snack.
A watermelon in the refrigerator and add a cold snack? Yeah.
And that was a good way to cool down.
Yeah, that's smart. You,
Our house didn't have, only had one air conditioner in them, so we just suffered as kids.
yeah, your house only had one air conditioner. Yeah, so you can freeze other fruits too, and strawberries, berries freeze really nice, and grapes. Grapes are when they freeze, and then they're cool when you eat them. That's another way. Does anybody have other ideas?
I noticed a lot of people using umbrellas if
Mhm.
they, and I always think they may have a dermatology problem
Mhm.
where they have to stay out of the sun. They have to get around.
Yeah,
But, and you didn't mention sunscreen.
yeah, sunscreen to protect your skin. Yeah, and then hats and umbrellas. That's probably a really good point. Hats with like a brim or something.
Yes,
Yeah,
yeah.
and then what were you saying?
I was saying, you can make ice cube lemonade,
Yeah,
ice cube. Yeah.
ice cube lemonades and popsicles. Yeah,
Kool-Aid ice cubes.
yeah, Kool-Aid ice cubes and yeah, lemonade ice cubes and popsicles.
My first summer in Sacramento, the flat I was renting did not have an air conditioner.
That's terrible. Yeah.
Second floor, so I had a swamp cooler didn't really work.
Mm-hmm.
So I just filled up the bathtub. With
Mhm.
water,
Uh-huh.
threw my bathing suit in the house, jumped in the bathtub and then walked around for a half hour, jumped back in.
Yeah, cool bath water. Yeah, that's probably pretty smart. Yeah, that's right up there with running through the sprinklers as a kid. Yeah, that's pretty smart.
So I
Mhm.
moved to-
Yeah, and then heat rises. So on the second floor apartment, yeah, it would be.
moved
Yeah, wow. Wow, that would be hard. Yeah.
Here's a question from chat.
Mhm.
Any ideas on reducing fatigue during heat waves?
Well, interestingly enough, the hotter you are, the more your fatigue increases. There are some health conditions that actually are fatigue related, like MS. And then the warm, some people are sensitive to heat. And then when they use the cooling methods, like that's what some of the cooling vests are, it actually reduces their fatigue. So I would say the more that you're able to both conserve energy and then reduce your core body temperature and keep it more maintained at a lower level, even with ice packs and things, the better chance you have of reducing fatigue.
Very good.
Mhm. It's a real thing in the summer. People tend to do feel more fatigued, easier. Any other ideas?
Cold washcloth.
Mm-hmm. Yep, cold washcloths around your neck. Mm-hmm. Lots of good ideas. Well, stay cool out there. We're heading into the 4th of July. There will be, I'm sure, some alcohol out there and various different things and some heat out there. So just stay safe and mhm. Planning ahead is good. All right. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Oh, I was gonna say they're really suffering in Europe right now.
Yeah. And I think some of those places don't have as much air conditioning because they haven't had the heat waves.
And then you know, that housing too.
Mhm.
You mentioned the, the more populated areas.